Yeah, that's tulip.
Hello everyone, we're here for our demo with Jean Wells and some of our lovely customers are here. Jean, what are you demoing today?
Well, I'm going to show how to cut without using rulers and sew up those slightly curvy seams. Okay, one of the things that I do when I'm wanting to learn a new task is to do something smaller and to just play around some. This is a little sample, that I've started, and my other sample got made into a pincushion already, but I will pass this around so you can kind of look at it, and then I'm going to go through the techniques. And what I love about this technique is that it also allows me to experiment, and I'm always wanting to try new color palettes. I just find I'll see something and think, well, how would that work together? When I just pulled off our little fat quarter things for this one, and I had no idea that this gray was going to read so blue until it got next to the orange. But blue and orange are opposite on the color wheel, so it really, each of them intensified, but that wasn't planned, and that spontaneity is what I really like about this. And it also, it's like playtime. So I'm going to get started, and I usually work about 8 inches in length. If this was for something specific and I needed to have like a 7.5 inch block when I was done, I would add an inch and they'd be 8.5, because you always need to tidy up the ends when you're done. And I use, either the teeny rotary cutter, and I think they're not making this one anymore. Olfa isn't. That's what Annette tells me. She's not been able to get them. Or this size. But I don't like the huge blade one because I can't see the fabric. The mechanism that holds the blade is so big that you can't even see what you're cutting. And obviously that's fine when you have a ruler, but we don't have a ruler. So, Holly, you can come to the table. Holly is our new bookkeeper. She writes everybody's paychecks. And I always stand when I cut too. A lot of people get these little sewing stations together where they just swivel around in their chairs. But if I'm just swiveling around in my chair and I go to cut, by the time I get out here, I don't have the same strength. And you have a tendency to lose your sense of direction, or you always start going this way or this way. So I find if I stand up and cut, that I can keep that same pressure, and I can really think about the line that I want to cut. So I know always that I'm going to be taking 1/4 inch away on either side of that fabric. So you don't want to get it too little. The other thing is you think about the fabric always facing you. With solids, it doesn't matter. But, when I made this little piece with this print, I obviously want it facing me, or else we would have ended up with that, which might be okay too if that was your intention. So now, I thought I'd put the kind of orangey color next, and I take and barely overlap it over the orange. And then I'm going to keep my fingers over here as I'm cutting. And I have gotten in this really bad habit of doing this as I cut, and I'll tell you why. Because the blade will start getting a little dull or something, and it's like I don't want to have to go get another blade yet, so I just do this. And I've been trying to kind of stop, but it doesn't always work real well. So now I'm pulling it apart, but I'm not just picking this up like this. because I want to know how to sew it back together when I'm done. And what you do is look at your board, and this has to match up. Then we know it's going to sew together. So I take the one on the right, flip it over, and I just hold it like that. And you would think that that wasn't going to sew together because we're used to those straight lines where everything lines up. But this will line up as you sew. So I'm going to set that down for just a second. And I use, when I'm sewing, what's called bunny tails, just little scraps of fabric folded over. And I've sewn through one now, and the presser foot is down. And that way I can just feed this in. Because you're doing a 1/4 inch and you've got these kind of funky angles, a lot of times the feed dog doesn't want to grab your fabric, and then you have everything pushing down in the throat plate and you have a big mess to clean up. So I find if I just use a bunny tail starting and ending, I don't have that issue. I guess we're on.
You're juiced.
And I want to sew a 1/4 inch, but this isn't like if you were off a thread or two, it isn't like the quilt police are going to show up. Because in the end, you know, you press one direction or the other, but there isn't a lot of stress on any of these seams. Now, you might want to stand up so that you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Or else, if you kind of keep your distance, you could stand behind me. Yeah, we have to make sure we're doing our distance. I'm going to
Well, and she'll demo this throughout the whole next hour, so
yeah,
if
I'll
you
do it
miss
over and over.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold up the top thread, and then my right hand, so here, the top thread, the top fabric. So here's this fabric, and they're like this. And I scoot them so they end up like that. So my right hand is just kind of pushing that fabric under the other one until they're right in front of the presser foot. And then I sew about a 1/2 inch or an inch, just depending on how curvy it is. And I'm going to pull this out right now so you can see what it looks like. See how things aren't matching up yet? But, you know, my seam is just fine. So I'm going to have to go back to that. I don't normally do this, but...
You're on the wrong side, Mom. Flip it.
Oh, I thought, what is it? That's why you have to have your daughter hovering.
I am hovering, aren't I?
Yes, she is hovering with her little helicopter. You know what? This thing can go slower, so I'm going to make it go slower. Yeah, if you have the ability to slow it down a touch, you know, when you're first learning this, because you're positioning those raw edges as you go. Okay, then I've got my little bunny tail. I'm just going to slip in there and stop, and then I don't lift up the presser foot. So now I've got this, and I can press in either direction. But I usually press toward the dark. But this little piece is supposed to kind of be a landscape with a hill or a mountain. So I will try and press down, because we know if we looked out, that mountain would be in the distance. So when your seam allowances are pressed away from it, it helps create a little bit of perspective. You know, probably nobody can tell, but I always think it makes a difference. And I really like to press with steam, and pressing is this. Ironing is this, like, I remember my mother doing lots of ironing. And these days we don't do a whole lot of ironing, but when you're sewing, I do an up and down motion, because you're working with smaller pieces of fabric, and you don't want to stretch them. So there's my little seam. And I'm going to do another one now, so just in case you need to see it twice.
You're going to be doing it for a whole hour, Mom.
And when I'm sewing at home, when I finish doing something, I kind of toss it in a pile. And one of the things that I find happens, it's just these wonderful little surprises, is that you aren't trying to organize it and putting them next to each other, and they might be really good in your piece. So I don't like that. See, I'm really auditioning. This looks too dull to me, so I don't think I'll use that color. But I'll just put the green.
Oh, go figure.
Yeah. I do love green.
Green.
No, Mom, you don't
Well,
like
at
green.
the store, the girls call this Jean Green. So, and I'm following the last cut that I made. That's my pattern. And I didn't do this once.
Good job.
So again, you know, I have the two facing each other side by side, and they fit. So then I can flip this one over, and I go to my machine and I line up the first inch, raw edges together. And you can see where the big curve is where that orange is. And again, your left hand holds up the top fabric, your right hand slides the bottom fabric until they're next to each other. I just thought of what I'm going to tell you next time. On the next seam, I have one more thing to tell you.
Well, tell us now.
No, because it'll work better if I show you. I did kind of a little curvy thing there.
Yeah, you have a big curve.
Uh-huh. But it worked.
So how big, since no one here is asking questions, I will ask you questions. How big of a curve, like, I mean, how dramatic can you do without getting little bubbles?
I find, see this little mountain here?
So that's about as curvy as you can get?
And I end up taking little snips
Oh, let me come in on that.
on that kind of curve.
Okay, hold
Let
that
me
up.
hold
Let me
that
see.
up.
Yeah. Because I think that that's the
And-
test. Like, how much of a curve can
Right.
you get before you start?
And I've even done bigger, you know, deeper curves too. But what you do is snip in only 1/8 of an inch. If you snip in more than 1/8, then sometimes you'll get those places where you won't have this nice line here. You'll have a little place where you snip too far. It makes it point up.
So the seams are a scant 1/4 inch or 1/4 inch?
Quarter, and sometimes they end up scant.
Scant, yes.
We're very technical, you know.
This is folk art.
It is.
Yeah. So, and you know, because I'm only working 8 inches on this, 8 inches long, I am, yeah, I need to put water in this iron. I'm so used to having steam.
Do you want me to go get you some? Hey, Nancy, would you go get some water for the iron, please? Thank you.
Okay. So what I want to do, if you were doing something, let's say more than 12 inches, then I make little registration marks with my pencil. So we're going to pretend like this is more than 12 inches. So I'll make my cut.
Mom, there's a question. Someone wants to know what's up with the little square at the beginning and the end. Will you explain
Oh,
the
that's a bunny tail.
bunny tail to people again?
And that's so you don't have to lift up your presser foot.
Uh-huh.
Is someone asking you on your phone?
You're live on Facebook. Okay, so she obviously didn't know she was live on Facebook. She thought I was just videoing. That would be a big fat no, Mom. You're live. And Deborah wants to know how you like the Eversew.
In the family, I can tell you that.
We love our Eversews.
So
They're good machines.
Yeah, but everybody's out of them right now because everybody's been buying them. You can't even get one. Okay. Now,
Michelle, she snips curves after she sews. Oh, I'm being beckoned. Hold on.
I like these chalk pencils because I know the chalk will come out, but I am marking in the seam allowance. So I've also used lead pencil. These are lighter colored fabrics, so I'm going to use the lead pencil. And what I will do is put a little mark on the green and on the white, and I put them about 4 to 6 inches apart, and I'm not measuring, I'm guessing. If
You figure if it matches up here and you line these up, then it's going to line up when you sew it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you've sewn clothes at all, you remember notches, like putting a sleeve in. There's that little pointy thing that comes out to call a notch, and this is creating the same effect. Now, we'll pretend like this was a deeper curve, and I love these little Kai scissors, and I keep this size here for me because a lot of times I'll even cut little pieces while I'm sewing. But I'm going to snip in just 1/8 of an inch on the inside curve, and if you just remember, the inside curve is the cave.
There you go, Michelle. That was your answer for the curve, for the cutting.
And I didn't quite get 1/8. That's because I was being filmed and I got nervous.
Oh, I'm making you nervous? Whatever.
Well, we have to have a little humor.
We do have to have humor.
Okay. Now, when I get ready to sew, and I'm going along here, I can lift this up and make sure it's laying down close to that other line. If it's not exactly, the quilt toys don't come.
Not in our shop.
No, we don't allow them in here. Or else I wouldn't have had a job for a long time.
It is your shop, so you get to decide.
Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to lift that up. Yep. Well, of course, it's only 1.5 inches, so it's been good. So, and now as I'm coming toward where I made those snips, the fabric just spreads apart and becomes more of a straight line rather than that inside curve that it was. I was determined to see how much of this I could do, and I should have brought a piece I made, but it actually had curves that went like that, and I was able to do it. I always leave a little extra on the outside, though, that I can trim off, but yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, anybody who wants to know, the demo videos will be up on our YouTube channel as soon as I upload them. So, in case you want to see it closer up. Because I'm really up in her grill right now, so.
Well, and now I slipped the bunny tail in.
Okay, so this is what the bunny tail does. Someone was asking. So what this does is when she puts this in here, it keeps all your threads nice and tidy for when you start your next seam and you don't get that rat nest underneath.
And then you can see here's the last one, so we just snip it off. And unfortunately, I don't know what happens to mine. I usually have 3, but I do have a cat, so I think Nina has them up in her nest or something.
So have you ever done these like with
Ooh,
super
this is so much better.
super long pieces, Mom?
Yes,
Or
and
do you?
that's when you really need the registration marks, because I did a quilt once that was 62 inches this way,
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, cutting, I'm like walking along cutting like this. And then I would just pick it up, and they weren't big curvy lines, but it started all going, you know, slipping.
Uh-huh, yeah. So
And
you started
so
registering marked then?
I put the registration marks in, and then I started sewing from one end the first time and the other end the next time. So I switched out. So, you know, I would sew from this end for this seam, but then this end for this seam. You know, it's kind of all those little things that you do with regular sewing too. And see how these aren't lining up perfect at the bottom? And when I cut them, I was trimming them so they're the same. But that top fabric, the one that is sitting like this, you will have some pull with it. But you want to make sure you're not tugging it to fit, because that's the tendency that you feel like you have to do that, but you really don't.
Well, and also if you make it all a little bit bigger, you're going to square it up, right?
Mm-hmm. And I brought some examples here of cutting without rulers. This one is a quilt I made early on when I learned how to do this, and I became just so obsessive about this technique because I loved doing it. And on this particular one, you can see where it's narrower here and wider here, but I put a little piece of white in between every single one. So there's a lot of thickness here on the side from all of that. But, you know, I got the effect that I wanted. And this photograph that I saw when I got ready to do this was antique knitting needles in Martha Stewart. And
Such a cool photo.
Once in a while there was, you know, a really cool end on the needles. So I made sure I put ends every once in a while, but I didn't want to put them every time. And the thing that was interesting to me too was that all the knitting needles weren't the same length. So you got all these different lengths. And as I started making it, and I can remember it was on a Friday night, and my husband owns a restaurant, and they were always busy Friday nights, so that was a big sewing night for me. And I got down to about here, and I realized I was getting wider over here. And you know, normally in patchwork we're all the same width or whatever. And I thought, I'm just going to let it be what it wants to be. And I just love the way this piece came out. But I ended up mounting it on top of another quilt. So it's like two quilts, and I call this a portrait finish because it kind of looks like a mat board if you went to a framer. And this little guy, you know, it's just made plain with fabrics, and you can see all these little purple things I had, and they're different sizes. But to put it together, everything is done horizontally. So you can have a lot of variety in here. Like for this one, this thing got sewed to a piece of yellow here, as did this one, and then this piece of yellow got put in between here. Then over here, this was a whole section. I sewed this to it and this to it, then added the yellow out here, and the final seam is here. So it's kind of like doing a puzzle and having to start at that smallest part and figuring out where to go. But I call that sort of composition totem, because it reminds me of a totem pole or whatever, or stacked rocks. Sometimes you see stacked rocks. This little piece isn't very curvy, but yet all the lines were cut without a ruler. And I was trying to be, just kind of straighten up the lines so that it had more of a severe feeling. You know, sometimes these get very organic, where I wanted less of an organic feeling in this. And these were, I had put all those fabrics in a little baggie for some reason. And when I was cleaning my studio in March, I found the bag. And I I thought, well, I'm going to do something with that. So, and then this little piece is similar to the idea of this, where I just went and picked 6 things, and so I put together these 2 blocks.
She wasn't happy with them.
Hated it. It was just so intense. And one thing I found, like on this one, is that this yellow just seems so strong. And, you know, then I made this little guy. And my next thought was, okay, I could eliminate something. So I made this block, and to me it's much calmer, but there's none of this yellow in it. Or did I take anything else out? No, I think it's just that yellow. So when I was doing the lecture series on color, I had these, and I said, you know, I really still not sure I like them. Well, the minute Val was done filming, she said, Mom, where's your fabric? She pulled this blue out and cut a little piece of this and this and said, there you go. So I sewed it up. So you never know, you know, what's going to work or not work. So, any questions?
So when you put that together, you'll
I'll have to do it like I did that one.
yeah, do it in a puzzle.
And these, see, we're going to be pincushions, so they have a back on them.
Oh.
So I'll probably just cut them off.
Oh, let's sew them on like that. Why
Or
not?
they can be sewn on this way afterwards. But then I could make this one the same way. Then I would need a seam across here to put the yellow in. And then I would need, so then I'd have a seam that's going here. Then I would sew a little piece of blue to the end of that and the end down here. And then I would have a seam here and a seam on the other side. And you know what I do when I'm figuring this stuff? I have to put it on a piece of paper.
And go, so this
don't
one to
need
this
graph
and this
paper.
to this. And
And I will put a dotted line that goes dot, 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 dot up to here, because I know I have to hook up to that. Or I could have a piece of blue that just goes straight across here and here too. But you really put to use like your engineering skills of how am I going to put this together. When all else fails, you can applicate.
Easy for you to say.
Golly.
So when the lines are straight and are you still cutting a diagonal or are you
Yep.
Is everything still on grain, but you're just
You don't worry too much about grain. I always, you know, though my strips are, you know, like this is crosswise grain, this is lengthwise grain. You know, I could have something on the bias, little pieces, and it wouldn't matter. But if I want a diagonal, so, you know, now I've got a diagonal. So
moves
if
too quick.
I wanted to have gray next to it, which I don't, but it's a big enough piece, then I lay the tan on the gray. So I could, if I wanted, this really, really straight, I could take and lay a ruler on there. And you don't have to go and make a 45 or a 60 or a 90, you know, all those numbers on your ruler. You just do it what you want. And so at this point, I would then cut like that and flip this over, and I would sew that together. So the technique works for a lot of things. What I love about it is that when I'm in the classroom and all these people are sewing and everything, and I always have them start making strata, and they'll make a piece that's, you know, maybe about this long by the time I finish demoing and whatever, is that everybody's line work is different. It's like it's your signature. And I get to the point I can recognize people's work. Like if I see a piece in a magazine or something, or even somebody sends me something, a lot of times I'll know what student it was, because I get to, so I can recognize them. Okay. Any questions?
going to ask a question about the lines. You kind of answered that already. When I'm cutting like that, all of my lines do look the same. I try and do something novel, and it's like my cutting tool won't go that way.
It likes to go this way, this way.
Well, I think we get partial to certain movements, and I think like it's, except when I'm going to square up a quilt, most of the interiors of all my work is done this way. And so this has become kind of a drawing tool in a way.
I love that little one. I'm sorry to hear.
Well, there's other companies that make small ones, though.
Fritz is still making a small one. But I remember when I bought this, when I was at market, golly, and it was probably 30 years ago when these came out. And the guy that came up with them, he's standing in the aisle, and they're walking along the aisles at the booths, and he's like a carnival barker, going, try this thing, and you see him in there, and I think, oh, it's just another gimmick. That's what I thought. So I didn't buy any. I can't go to the store. And then I went to a workshop a couple months later, and this woman was using these, and she was so much faster. And so I went and bought one, and a cutting board, and a ruler, and tried it myself, and then we got them for the store. But I just felt like this guy was pulling my leg or something, just the way he presented everything. So it was pretty funny. But I didn't use this one for years, because once these came out, this became my tool. And I still like this one a lot. But there is something about this one that I feel like I can, if I want to get really intricate, I can really get some nice line work. So.
All right, Facebook Live, we're signing off. Ask lots of questions, we'll answer.